Right, welcome everyone at the next multi-network community sync. Today is November 25th. We're almost close to the end of the year. So I have few topics that we can continue from last time we talked. I think Lionel is not here to give us some rundown from his side from KubeCon. I think that's something we can read offline, and then maybe next time he can give us some additional info. Uh,
Actually, Lionel's asked me to cover that if we have
oh,
time.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. If you can do that, oh, that will be so. Let's put it this up top, Sunyan,
Okay.
and yeah, if you can do that, then perfect. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let me share the screen. Let's see.
Uh,
You
you
have
want
to.
me to share
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah,
I
you can. Yeah, please, if you could.
I can quickly do that. Share this.
Yeah, this note is created by Lionel. He make a summary for like what we discussed during the KubeCon NA last week, I guess.
Mhm.
And yeah, we have three discussions happen in the maintainer rooms during the conference. And as he already summed up here, like we have three topic discussed there. The first day is on the maintainer there. We discuss about the pod network API itself, whether like the need of it or like what is the requirement, like what is should reference for. The second time we discuss deep dive on the network attachments is a little bit related to the pod network API as well. It's more like the overlay network attachments. And the third discussion one is more underlying API specific to like the how the DRA workings are like the challenges we face with the DRA driver for the networks. Um, Starting from the first one is about the pod network API. I guess he give the motivations of the why we need the pod network API here. Basically, we discuss about like we want to build an ecosystem that have the standardized interface like um to have some API that we can have a service or network policy gateway API for the secondary networks. And like specifically it's more like for the Kubernetes SDN type, like software defined network type, that we create the virtual secondary networks for the pod and we want to refer to it. By the way, Sapar is here. I think Masaharu and Sapar is also in all of the discussions, so please correct me if I understand something wrong or you want to add up something. Um, okay, I guess, yeah. Okay, and yeah, then he also lists up the use case here, like multi-tenancy, virtualizations, network separations, and redundancy. So like is this a solid use case for why we need the secondary networks? Um yeah, and maybe we further need some like network policy on top of that. This is like what we put into like example of the existing API. I think this one he copied from like our last discussion as well, that we have a lot of the APIs are for the secondary networks or like for virtual network stuff. And I mean, original's motivations, he's also would like to standardize these APIs. However, during the discussions, there is I don't know, but it seemed like there is no um, consensus at the end that whether we want to standardize this or not. But what we do agree is that maybe we need it for as a reference object. In my understanding, could you go down a bit to the picture? Um, yeah, I think this is what he said the pod API should look like. we have a user create the pod networks or the pod network APIs, and we have some network controllers that watch that APIs, creating the network regarding to that, and and at the same time create resource slice with the list of that pod networks, and user use that pod network to attach to it pod. This is like the way of the hot network API should be referenced to the DRA driver, but I think he forget to like add another layers for like linking this pod network to the higher layer that is their like their service or let's say network policy. Yeah, that is mostly about the first discussions that we have about the pod network APIs. Any questions or something? But at the end, like the first day, we didn't get the conclusions on whether like how it will look like. But I think somehow we got some consensus in terms of like we may need it for the network policy for the secondary networks. That is what I learned. So any add up or Masaharu Panda-san, if you have anything to add up, please chime in.
Thank you. Thank you. But I need to add your comment or your explanation. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, what I heard from our side, folks that been on the call, is that I think I think at least the current PR needs more explanation, and basically needs to be more streamlined to kind of the use case and explaining why we really need that object at all. I think this is good. I need to kind of expand my doc with some of this. This is what I heard from Bowie. He was on some of the discussion, so that was kind of confusing.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's exactly what you say. Like the currently PR is in like Mr. The justifications or like the need of the pod network API.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's something that I'm gonna work probably maybe today, tomorrow, to update some of those. But yeah, and I think number 3, I think this is called out here. It's implementation specific. So, but whether you do this or not, I think the one summary out of this, what I see is we need to how far we define the pod network itself, right? So that's the one question we have to answer on. What do we want to standardize on, right? I think that's the only thing, and this is what we have another item to talk about in the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, as I told, like there is a 2 use case raised up for like the pod network API. One is for using like for the higher layers, like using it as a reference for the network policy, and another thing is to use for standardized implementation layers. I think the higher one, like most of the people do agree that we may need it. I mean, like no one implemented it yet, but we may need it in terms of like for the futures of multi networks. But for the implementations, standardizations is still unclear, like whether we really want to standardize it or not, or like what is the benefit of standardized their thing comparing to like keep the thing at the network providers sites. I mean, if I remember correctly, Bowie's like give some examples of like if something wrong on the implementations, like some configurations go wrong, something like that. And if it's standardized into the Kubernetes, it means like maybe Kubernetes maintainers will get some problems report on that, even it's not actually the problems of Kubernetes itself or something like that. So that is one concern that raised up that we may not want to standardize it. But yeah.
One of the main reasons is to have a common object referring to a network to which we can ask other objects to refer to. think of, I see, I think somewhere where he was saying is, I think somewhere here. Yeah, this guy, right? Is that it here? Or somewhere.
It's maybe not
But
there,
basically, if I want to select serviceability, right, and I would like to point to a specific network to enable the serviceability.
Yeah, that would be
Just
like the need of the higher level. I mean, like
yeah, exactly. So
implementation.
that's to be able to reference that object.
Yeah,
Because
that
then we have a more consistent story to go to, for example, to Gateway API and say, oh, can your Gateway API reference a pod network, since pod
sure.
network is a standard object, rather than, oh, can you reference this or custom object that every implementer has. So that might be something that's that won't fly, but having a
Yeah.
standardized object, that's the main thing.
Exactly. I mean, like that is the use case that we are agree on. Like it can be used as a reference object.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
what we are not like sure is that whether we want to like combine or the spec, like how to say, use this one as an implementations configuration stuff.
And
Instead
that's super
of,
fair, right? That's why I opened, that's
yeah.
why my initial version of the subject was bare bones. There was nothing, because every implementer is going to have their own story of what they want to do. And this is what I learned like from the last 2 years when we started talking about this, any reference, this kind of reference object, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and there is another proposal, like instead of like putting the configurations, like the PL configurations here, you put like a reference, like the way that I don't remember, but like you can put like API versions, kinds, and reference object to
Yeah.
like the
Yeah,
implementation.
there was I think our initial design had exactly that. Like instead of us defining some parameters,
Yes.
you would point to some other custom object that your implementation support.
Yeah.
Something that was floated, but I think with the current approach of a raw text, you can go both ways. You can have your parameters built in, or you can just point to a separate object. It's up to you what you want to do, because right now as we have it, and we can talk, I can show that later on, but yeah.
I think that would be more like acceptable in terms of like instead of defining a common parameters,
yeah
could be like a reference or like the free object. But I'm not sure about free object as well. Yeah, that is the first thing we discussed on the first day, and the second day is more like the continuous from the first one. Let's say we need let's say we have a pod network APIs, how it could work with the DRA drivers, how it attached to the pod is the second thing we talk about. And it's like the first picture that is shown above, like when the user define the pod networks, we have the pod network API object created, and we have some controller that watch this pod network API, and that controllers could be like their any SDN controllers that will build the networks and create the resource slides. The next thing is that how it's linked to the other physical networks. I'm not sure is here or not, but let me check
I
the.
think this is the claim here, right, that he creates right here.
Yeah,
right?
and yeah. The way that the pod will be claimed will be like that, using the pod networks at the device. But in the case that the pod networks link to like using some master networks and all the physical networks, I mean physical NICs on the host. If you go down a little bit, is have another picture showing like how it's linked to each other's. I'm not sure it's not linked here, but yeah, what Lionel show here that we should have another like NetDev DRA driver that expose all the list of the physical device. And if the pod networks API controller use any of physical network, it should claim that physical networks out to make sure that the other driver will not take that physical networks, something like that. So It's not there, but I don't know where he put it. But it's kind of the two layer of the resource claim. Like the first one claim the physical device, and user claim the networks.
So basically, this is about like the It's0 and McVLAN claiming. So make sure that we cannot. Is that
Yeah,
what?
but actually it's not that pictures, but like I'm not sure where he put it, but there's like two layers. One is not MacMillan DRA driver. Let's say this is a NetDev DRA driver that
Mhm.
expose the physical device like Ethernet 0, 1, 2, 3. And then the pod network controllers, if they use the Ethernet 0, let's say, or Ethernet 1, it should like when it create the controllers, it should be a demo set. It will claim that physical networks so that the other DRA network will not claim the same physical networks. Yeah, and the user just claim the pod networks, don't care about like the physical one. That is
Yeah,
their
I see.
approximate.
Mhm.
And that one it would be more like the design for the overlay networks. I mean like the virtualized one.
This
Uh
is basically description of how an implementation can manage the resources, right?
yeah,
Because I don't think we definitely want to build a reference implementation here, but we don't want to impose how you slice and dice your resources, right, on the node, because that boils down to however you want it in terms of in implementation side. We only want to standardize on how on this piece, right? That the
mhm.
where was this on this piece, right? How do we start? How do we mark a specific resource, a specific pod network, right? That's the only thing we want to standardize. How someone slice and dices or these things is up to the implementation.
Yes, or yeah, it could be it should be like separated from what
Yeah,
we discussed. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
the SDN stuff should be the pod network API, but like the current is our, I mean, the current DRANet, for example, is all like the current DRA net drivers, MacWLAN, let's say,
Mm,
it can like directly claim the physical device as well. That is
yeah.
what we discussed. And I think the last thing we discussed is about like CNI DIA driver. Like we discussed a lot, like there's many challenges to have a single CNI DRA drivers, and also like we not. I mean, like first the motivations of the CNI DIA driver is like a bridge from the old fashions of the CNI to the DRA, but Lionels and Bovie do raise a significant point that if we implement that, it could like un out of our control. I mean, like the people will always use that, will not like do the migrating to the RA, but just use the CNI. And in addition to that, we'll write request for the chain for the CNI DRA driver to support the CNI with like Lionel himself like don't want to keep the CNI, but more like want to push it to the NRI instead for the secondary networks. So we are discuss a lot like, and also like the way we could integrate several CNI into a single resource line or multiple resource lines. And yeah, I'm not sure he lists all the challenges here, but there is a couple of challenges that is hard to tell. And also like if we want to choose the CNI native, we will reach the limitations of NRI to execute the CNI, which is good like more than 2 seconds, something like that. But I'm not sure whether like the NRI will fix the thing or we need to implement something else. But
Mm.
what we have a conclusion is that maybe we want to archive the CNI DRA drivers, and instead we want to enrich what Antonio's has initially do in his repo on like facilitate the peoples to migrate to the DRA drivers for the networks instead. And also we discussed one issue that very important, and we may need to change on the on the core DRA, like is that if we have multiple DRA drivers and it's managed the same network resource, like for example, we have the IPv LAN DRA drivers and we have another is RAV DRA drivers that we want to do some hybrid stuff on the same pool of the resource or pool of the NICs. How could we like avoid the conflicts and like how we can like keep one from the other, something like that. So from our discussions, it seems like we are going to create a GitHub issue on that and brainstorm over there whether like we need a change on the DRA or not.
Yeah, the last one is basically how do we manage the resources, right, on the slice, and how do we represent those virtual versus like SROV? Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. That's all what we discussed during the KubeCon.
All right, that's awesome. Thanks, Sunyan, for for this. This is this is awesome. And one thing this is definitely common is basically I need to get this part one done better so that we can put it into the PR that I created and better describe this. I will work on this. Yeah, the other things is something that we need to start discussing. I wonder what are the kind of inputs on the pod network itself into the spec, something that we can start next discussing. Let's get back to that. Share this tab. All right, if folks, I think probably most of you have this link. I didn't mention at the beginning, but if you have some other topics to talk, to add, feel free to add it here. Otherwise, we can, if there's nothing, we can start on the next thing, is to talk about the kind of the spec, right? So let me get back to here. Last week, this is what we kind of were thinking of having. Let me bring this back here. And we were talking about basically the spec, right? The highlighted things is something that we are thinking might be added to the feed, to the object, the current proposal, because the current way it is, it's what I see. The conclusion was from the discussion is it has some enable, disable flag and a provider. That's it, and the parameters blob. The parameters basically can be either you put some configs or you can put just a reference to something what you own, right? So you can go both ways, and it's up to your implementation on how to deal with that. This is where the provider then would flag indicate on who owning the specific pod network object, and then deal with the blob accordingly, and then validate it and then handle the status. I think the other thing I want to bring up, and this is why the node IPAM is brought up here, is we talked about IPAM. And I saw like the where is it? The OVN's user-defined network, and I think I saw in the other doc Isovalent the Cilium's proposal somewhere here had. Let me bring this up here as well, so we can have it. Had an IPAM story inside. Inside, I have to do this, not here. Let's do that. Inside the object, something that I'm kind of pushing back on, and the reason because of that is like here there's an IPAM story, is because every implementation might have their own ways to do it. Every platform, think of it like at Google, when we do is we push it to some external factors that reference the network, right? This is how IPAM is done. We do have some routes, some gateways defined for the whole spec of the network, but IPAM story is done completely outside of the object. And the reason for that one is on our side is that in clouds, versus what we have the offerings on premise, the IPAM is completely done differently, right? It's user defined versus just through GCP objects in the cloud, right? So that's why we kind of push that out. Not to mention that's how this object has been defined as well, and this is where I'm coming this out from. There was a big email thread, not sure everyone remembers that, for this object, for this project. This is the let me maybe link that this way. So this object, let me share this tab. Let's see. So this project was explicitly defined to define cluster IPAM for pod network. What happened is that, and by the way, this project was part of Core initially, but there was a big pushback that not every platform provider implements this that way. Basically, uses the nodes pod CIDR fields to do their IPAM. And basically this would kind of implicate that, yes, you have to do it that way. I'm trying to get to here. So what eventually was decided to not put it in the core and push it out as a it's in SIGs now as a separate object, right? So it can be an add-on added to your cluster, but it's not a mandatory core piece. So what I would think, if we were to do some sort of IPAM, this is where we could push another aspect of that, right? Where you can define your cluster CIDR, you define your ranges, what's not on, what is the IPAM story behind your network. Just an option on how to do this. Imagine if this spec, what it defines is which nodes to apply the specific CIDRs, what is the per node bits. So this is for, think of this was initially in mind to apply for host local IPAM story. So it's not fully, it just have one ways on how to do the IPAM. And then define the ranges, right? You have V4 and V6 ranges, which are then sliced by this per node host bits and applied to specific node in that manner. Not sure whether this is but this is, keep in mind, cluster-wide object, which that's why this is done like that. I wonder whether this, for example, range can be made optional in such a way that if I have a cluster-wide range, I could support that and have that. Because like for myself, we see a use case to have a cluster-wide IPAM, not per host, because of like optimization of how many IPs you waste, right? So, but this is an example of how IPAM can be done, and every implementation might have their own object via which they do some CIDR stuff. So that's why I would prefer these objects to rather define the IPAM story rather than put it into the pod network. Just as an FYI, that's why I'm bringing this up as well, to kind of let folks know that such a thing exists in SIGs, about defining what CIDRs to use and what to do with them. And this is something that could be then pointing to a pod network as another reason to have the pod network on how to do the IPAM, right? And then your implementation leverages that and do something. Or if you don't like this, you can do whatever you do in your implementation today and do basically something similar, right? To have a pointer to your IPAM. So that's why I would put. That's why I was last time pushing back on having any IPAM definition explicitly. The only thing useful here is to have identification of what sort of IPAM you expect. So basically V4 only, V6 only, or dual stack. So then when you point to or you align this with your IPAM story, for the user, it's easy to identify, oh, I need, you didn't specify, for example, V6 for your dual stack network, right? So then you can indicate through conditions and cross-validate whether all the parameters are there and they are all correct. And lastly, we do wanted to have a pod CIDRs basically as a status field to kind of indicate what cluster-wide CIDRs this network uses, right? And then this is for any purposes of your handling. And I see that for even for us, this is useful to kind of identify, especially for multi-home pods, to say that, okay, for these ranges, you go through that pod network and for that interface in the pod, so that you can properly connect through the rest of this network when you exit to that network, right? So this is done inside the pod in proper routing configuration over there, and this is where this would get leveraged for. Any questions to this IPAM story? If not, then I think we can continue on the other common aspects of. I think, oh, the one thing I missed is this thing. We found the type of a network common between the, I think, Google version and the user-defined network. I don't see. Oh, no, there is an IPAM mode. I don't see any such thing in the isovalent example. I'm not sure, folks. Anyone, is that something that we shouldn't have? Is that something that we wouldn't be able to standardize on moving forward, or is that a good thing to have? And basically, considering isovalents don't have anything, maybe they can. I remember they have just a Viet usually supported, so basically that the L3 type, and then just the isovalent application would have only one mode.
Hey, I'm Sebastian. I'm from Isovalent.
Yeah. Thanks. Welcome.
Yeah. So first time in the meeting, so I'm just listening in. Yeah, I think like for our case, so far I think we don't really have this type thing because we kind of do look at the network as a more L3 kind of thing. But I guess as long as it's not required that every implementation supports all the different types, I don't have any concerns of like adding this to say like this is a layer 2 or layer 3 kind of network. If an implementation can reject this, like saying sorry, L2 is unsupported, that's totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly that's what it will mean, right? And that will be fine as well. The only thing is to kind of standardize on the naming, I'd assume. Do we have any other ones? And then, selectively, I think the one aspect will be selective support, right? By implementation. That's perfectly fine. Same goes like with the IP families, right? You might not need to support like all the IP families, all the combinations as well, right? You might only support v4 and be done with that. I only support this one, at least in the, let's say, initial phase. So that will be similar thing, right? All right. Let me see. What other fields did we had? So for IPAM, this is kind of the identifier for, like in Google's case, identifier of what is the interface of the host. So like, for example, think of it as a master. MacVLAN CNI has a master field, so this is basically equivalence for this, right? What is my nodes interface via which I have to exit the node, right? This is done in our case for the purpose of like isolation. So the traffic from the additional interfaces is never parsed, is never kind of traversing the root namespace, is basically omitting the whole thing and just going directly to that interface to exit the node, right? The cross-node communication is handled in a specific way as well, so that ensure that only the right things, you can access the right things, right? I don't see any of that thing in the user defined in the UDN. Trying to find some commonalities here. That's why I'm mentioning it. Yeah, otherwise I think there's subnet. So this is IPAM. I wonder whether, because I see routes on the isovalent, I wonder whether routes is something that is worth having. This one, I didn't show the example, but this object does have routes as well. I think I need to just add, but this one has routes, and then I think I don't remember how that goes exactly, but give me a second. Let me find it to give you some example. Yeah, here it is. APIs. No, not test. Type around. And it has two only. Okay. So basically it boils down to having routes and then a list of twos. Yeah, and then there's a value of something, right? Let me just borrow some example. And basically this one doesn't allow you to specify per gateway per route. There's a gateway here for the whole network, and we just refer to that one as the default gateway for all the routes, as the gateway to exit for all the routes for that object. That's what this one does. I'm not sure whether having multiple gateways per each. The problem with that one, you have to configure the gateway itself as well. I think that's possible to do for that network. So I think this is something that probably can be done as well, right? Let's do this. And then what you can do is configure it gateway and have some. So now that's what basically what we have in ours. But I think what we are proposing is this, because that's one of the commonalities I see. Parameters family. I think this will be another one, right?
Excuse me, Maciej. Sorry. Could you check your share screen?
Oh, what was I sharing? I apologize. I keep sharing the wrong screen. Thank you for that.
Mitchell's, before you go like further on that, based on the discussions again, I make sure that we get the consensus that we are going to like find the common fields and define it there.
Yeah.
I mean, based on the discussions I got from the first day, it seemed like there's a lot of concern to like defining the field in that spec. I mean, for the state, that is for sure, because like we have a concrete use case on like it could be used on the network policy of the sires and so on. That for the spec, if we expect this one to be used, so it will be used by the one whoever creating the network, right? Based on this. Yeah, I mean like at some point, like for example, Sanya from Surya from Red Hat also like mentioned that maybe people just don't want to use the same how to say this one for their configs. I mean as you know, like for any like networks customs resource, they have like the parameters, may not the common one, but they want to validate it. I mean, it's hard to validate when it's become opaque, right? So maybe they want to
exactly
the networks, their custom networks. So in that case, these are common, maybe not used, and instead of that is like refer to the custom API is something that could be additional defined, not in the opaque parameters, but like let's say the reference, like the network reference or something like that in the spec, and directly refer to that custom resource instead of the spec here. That could be another options, but I do see like some pod networks provider who haven't have their own preference on the spec, but can create the pod network based on these common configs. Could use this one. I mean, like we have to. I'm not object to this proposals, but to avoid the same discussions happen again. So I think we have to clarify like who is going to use this spec and like how it's going to be used.
So, and that's a fair point, but the question would be then, what is, so we want to standardize on something, right? I think that's the key here.
Yes and no. I'm not sure because in the discussions they even have the discussion point whether like we really want to standardize. Is it like the need of the standardized spec? I mean, for sure we need the standard.
So it wasn't, to be honest. Like you can see my initial proposal here. If you look at this,
I
my
see it.
my proposal had 2 fields, and those are just enabled, provider, and parameters.
Yeah.
So my goal was not to standardize on a spec because exactly of that what you're bringing up.
Yeah,
but I got pushed back on that by the leadership of Kubernetes SIG networking, that that's just no standard, and you not providing anything, and what's the point of the object? So I am driving the other way around. So I think what has to happen is we need to have a better voice, and your concerns, and I think anyone else's concerns, should be then look at that PR. And please help me push back on some of the on me myself. I'm the proposal. So and basically from my point of view, that's a fair point to say that this object doesn't define anything, right?
Yeah, I think one issue is that like instead of saying you are going to standardize it, it's will be more like object reference for like linking between implementations to the secondaries network services or network policy. That makes like easier to put forward in my understanding, because when you say you want to standardize the networks implementations, is you will get some pushback for some other persons. But instead, I mean, for sure, one use case that we can see from this pod network API is the use of the higher levels, like network policy or those stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So, what I'm thinking is maybe you may have to clarify and maybe rename something, like the goal of this API is more like the object reference for the secondary networks, instead of like the standardized implementations, something like that.
Standardize on the same reference. I think that's what we want. We want to standardize on 2 things. We want to standardize on how we deal with the array, and then on standardize on one object that we can reference across the other things, right? So I think those are and that's true. That was my original. Maybe I didn't word it. That was my original idea behind it.
Yeah, right. I think that makes sense, but maybe like the misconcept come after like we are going to standardize the implementations configurations.
Yeah, no, that was never my goal.
Yeah,
that was never my goal, to standardize implementations, because everyone has their own approach and however they want to do this. So and I was always pushed back on what you're just saying, right? Okay, so I think this is where then, if we want to push back on any type of additional spec, I would still want to keep these parameters as a blob, to be honest with you. Why is that? Is in your implementation, you said you cannot validate this. You perfectly can, because basically what can happen is you expect a specific format out of the blob, and this is what you're gonna validate and basically ensure that the customer did a good job. And to be honest with you, if you are whether you create it in a blob parameters or in this way, it's the same thing, right? This blob has to be properly formatted in a YAML format, and it has to have the proper indentions, keywords, and values, right? And then basically what you do, you marshal that to a specific structure that you support, whether it's just an object reference with kind and name and namespace and what's not, or this is a set of parameters. It's up to you. And it doesn't, to be honest, it's not the only difference here is that you cannot do like, let's say, webhook validation. Like maybe webhook as well you could, but the generic, if you were to use the generic cell validation, you cannot reference that, but you would not be able to use the in cluster built-in webhook validation for kind for like object reference anyway, because you will not know what to validate against, right? If you say you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I see. But there's still like, of course, we can pause it and we validate it, but it's not the native way, right? Custom
Right.
is built for, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
I think the same. Is this the reasons why like the first versions of the DRAs got some pushback on like OPUX stuff as well? But anyways, what I'm thinking is that in addition to that, as I mentioned, like we just refer to the customs API, whatever it was. This could be additional fields, not in the parameters, but it's more like a more structured one, like say API versions, kind and name. So it's like the common
No,
way.
this is what I'm referring to, right? Because this is, you cannot validate those values anyway. This is what I'm referring to. And you can still write them the same way in the blob. But then this gives people the option to, I want to have I don't want to have, I want to reduce the amount of objects. So I'm going to move my everything to the blob. I don't need to reference it. You see? So that gives you both ways. That's kind of gives you the two ways. If you were to, if I had this, let me try to find that because I have it had it somewhere. Let me try to find that quickly.
Okay. But no worry. I think it's fine as long as like it's written in the PR how it could be referenced to the other object in the case that they want to use this. It should be fine in my understanding. I don't know, but yeah. Just one concern that I want to make sure like we have to clarify what we would like to standardize in this API and what can go, what cannot go, like with some concern.
Yeah, that part I definitely want to write. The spec has to be clearly defined on that part. So yeah, because I think people, whenever they look at it, they would expect exactly a standardized implementation spec, which maybe we should just fully push back on, right? I'm trying to find.
Yeah, I think we should just list out what we discussed, like what is the concern on like standardize of the implementations. Yeah.
Because this can be very, like, at least the current approach is very high level, doesn't define any spec and just specifies, and we just maybe need to crystallize better in the PR itself why we have this object and why we need it, right? I think that's what maybe we have to do better job on, and basically just go by that. I cannot find that reference anywhere.
And I think it's like you can communicate with Bobby. He has like I think he has a concrete idea like why we don't want the implementations spec in there. Yeah, maybe he can give like his justifications on like why we don't want to standardize the commons configurations. At the same time, we can communicate with Lionel. Lionel's also have the opinion to standardize the implementation. So it's kind of like you can't get both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Let me try where I had some examples somewhere. Any other comments to this? Anyone on kind of having spec standardized on the spec or just having a reference, or should we just have the reference or on a blob aspect itself? Trying to find out here. Yeah, something that we can then kind of, if anything, have a better wording. I will try to do that in the review of the PR itself, but yeah. Let me see. I think let me just do that. So I couldn't find the split, but I think what it boils down to is the question of having this. So object ref, and I will just say this is core view and object reference, right? So whether we do this or we expect someone to have this in a blob, right? I think either way, what I feel is you cannot validate this object because the only reason you would want to have this structurized is for webhook, for cell webhook, to be honest with you, because you can then use the built-in webhook in the API server to validate this object. But since this is a reference to something that the webhook will not know about, you cannot predefine. You will not do that.
No, but when you create the object, I mean, like for example, you create the UDN networks, the UDN stuff will validate the UDN networks. I mean, you cannot create invalid.
No, but then that's what I'm referring to. You have to have a custom. Okay, that's
Yes.
fine. So if I have a custom webhook, I'm already having a custom webhook, so I already lost the battle on having the built-in webhook. If I do that, what does it change? What's the difference between me checking up the structure, the blob, to be in the proper format as well?
The validators will be like the
same thing.
Kubernetes native. I mean, like Kubernetes native webhooks.
No, Kubernetes native cannot validate this for you.
No,
It will?
Not that fields. I mean, like with that fields, it can like validate on the object is not exit or not, but the detail of the configs or the details of the fields inside the custom API is validated by the controllers.
But you could check the same here, right? Whether this is not empty string.
No, we are not going. I mean, like it's not like empty or not empty, but it's built more like these fields have to be this value, have to be the string, or have to be the int, or have to be this list or something like that.
Let's, because I might not, we have 2 minutes. Maybe we can continue next week, if anything. But let's have those two examples. Let me do this. Like let's say object ref. Let me provide an example here. So now I will have kind, let's say I will do network, right? And then I will have my name blue network, right? Let's say that. So that's my first approach, right? And basically what this means is here I need to ensure that this object, this field isn't empty, right? And you have to do it in your, you probably could check that one in cell. Okay, that's fine. You can have a cell validation for this guy. But then these two other fields, it will be you will have to have your own custom webhook to check whether the kind is to the type of what you support and the name is whatever, right? But it will have to be your own custom webhook or a controller, which I recommend doing rather than a webhook, which basically what it will do is then in a status you can through a conditions you can say that the specific object isn't ready because the content isn't right. So the other approach, and tell me what do I miss if I go by this, right? It's not an object reference. It is just in the parameters, right? Right now, this is in parameters. No, I'm changing the, let's do this. And then I'm changing parameters, right? And this whole thing is indented. I have to write it the same way. It's this time, this is a blob, right? Let's comment this blob. So right now, since I already have a custom webhook, I make sure the parameters isn't empty string. This parameters isn't empty, and basically we can have a, for self-validation probably we cannot at that point, because even here we couldn't have the self-validation, because keep in mind self-validation will apply to everyone. So we might make sure this is still optional, right? So self-validation cannot be applied neither here nor here. So it boils down to your custom either webhook or controller that has to validate this or that. And in my opinion, for this type of reference, it doesn't change the fact that basically this has to then be marshaled into the specific structure that you defined, which is basically that same. You can just marshal. You expect this object reference, core v1 object reference, and whatever someone puts here has to marshal to that. And then if it doesn't, then you just throw in the condition error that you have an incorrect format, right? The only difference, okay, with this one is that you will know this right away when you apply it. Okay, there is that. So I see now the advantage, because this, if you make a, let's say you make a spelling mistake, it's CanID. Let's say you do this mistake, spelling mistake, it will right away tell you when apply that you made a spelling mistake. Okay, compared to this one, it will not catch it. But you can still just apply a webhook to do this and reject as well. You will have to have your own custom webhook, which is bad. Okay, so I see advantage now. Okay, when I walked through this, I see and I had to have this. All right, let's discuss this further next. I think next time it's going to be. We should have another meeting in 2 weeks. That's 9th of December. Okay. Let's continue the. Let me add that to the discussion and so that I remember. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.